Good morning. Welcome to another installment of The Traveling Therapist. I'm Lauren Perez, licensed clinical social worker in the state of Illinois. Eventually, I'm going to stop introducing myself, but since we're only on episode 3, there's still people who will be coming in, stepping in to see who I am, what I'm about. So don't get annoyed that I still introduce myself. Again, we're very, very new at this. So today, I want to talk about, before we get into any other type of a crisis situation, that the things that I've been working with, I want to talk about access, because that word has such a broad meaning nowadays. I'm seeing a lot of bad things come from access, whether it is internet access, whether it is access to drugs, access to people who have access to things you don't have access to. Primarily, my biggest concern right now these days with my children and adolescent population is the access to the World Wide Web on their smartphones. Now, don't get me wrong, I love technology. I love my iPhone. I love my Apple products. I love all of it. But these things are not being moderated. They're not being monitored even by parents. Parents are giving their kids phones younger and younger. My daughter has my old phone. She's almost 6, but it doesn't have a internet, or it's only accessible via the Wi-Fi, and she's only allowed to be on it for limited periods of time and only on Netflix. She has access to nothing else on that phone. She can FaceTime, but she can only FaceTime the family members that we have put in the phone. She does not have access to to email, because we have taken that off, and she doesn't really even know how to www. anything yet. The only apps that are on there is this little painting game that she likes, that I monitor to make sure that there's no inappropriate ads coming through. And she has Netflix. And again, like I said, she's got access to FaceTime, and only certain people can get a hold of her, and it's only set up via an email that I made, that I checked. So her access is limited. But there are kids her age at school who have the new iPhone 10, the newest version. They have unlimited data plans, and they are on the internet, and they're texting, and they're getting on social media, and they're using Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook and whatever else there is out there. I have stepped away from social media because of what I was seeing. It's just a cesspool. So these kids are all accessing these things. And with the access to the internet comes access to everything on the internet. And the beautiful thing about iPhones now is that they have parental control settings. So you can limit when your child can access certain apps, for how long that child can access that particular app. You can put it on sleep mode. You can block certain keywords. I mean, the parental controls that are on the phones now are awesome. They are on iPhones, and we don't do any other type of phone in my family other than an iPhone, so I really don't know a lot about the Android devices. I doubt they have this level of restriction on them. At any rate, not all parents know or even care about the parental controls, let alone do they know or care about what their kids are doing on those devices. I bring this up today because as I have worked with kids age 6 up till they're no longer kids, and we're talking about me working with adults. I mean, I've worked with people of every age in that range. My middle school and high school kids seem to be struggling most with texting, sexting, sex, pressure to be sexual, to send pictures and engage in sexual acts, or being shamed for not doing them, or doing them and then being shamed for being so easy. Because we don't live in a society that is sex positive. We live in a society that is very sex negative. I mean, that's not an opinion, that is a fact. If we didn't live in a society that was sex negative, then people who were in sex work would not be scrutinized and demonized the way that they are. If we did not live in a sex-negative society, women who work in the adult film industry would not struggle to make bank accounts, to have children of their own, and they wouldn't be experiencing this phenomenon where the other kids who have access to the internet somehow stumble upon one of those free porn websites, find these women who have children, so the kids have to go to school. Just because you work in adult films does not mean you're a terrible human being, does not make you a bad mother. Often you're a victim of circumstance. Something happened and you needed to make some quick money, so you went to that. There's nothing wrong with that. But the kids have access, and they find these images, they find these videos, they find the pictures, they find the websites. And with that access, they destroy other children. They out the kid whose mom is in porn, or whose father is in porn, or whose parents are in porn together. Sometimes it's a joint venture because it's marketable and it's profitable to the right demographic. My problem is not that porn exists. My problem is not that people look at porn. My problem is that parents are not monitoring their children, and the kids see this stuff and they share it with their friends, or they see these things and they regurgitate what they say or what they hear on the videos, or they try and mimic activities, or they text a little girl in their class that they like. They say something to her that maybe they shouldn't have said, but these are kids, and they get severely punished. There's no education happening right now. There is, I did this thing, it had to do with sex, it is punishable by death. You are being expelled from school. Parents are calling the police. Legal action is being taken, and children and adolescents are being placed on sex offender registries. Children and adolescents are being placed in jail. I'm doing a deep dive into all this, and I will have more videos to come on this topic. It's a problem. It is something that I don't agree with. I don't agree with giving a 7-year-old a smartphone and then getting upset that they looked at something that you didn't take the time to block the content of, and that kid, because this is what kids do, they see something and they want to go show their friends. So they go show their friends, and then that kid is now being labeled a monster. That's not fair. I think if you zoom out even from this, the bigger picture to that is that parents are not being realistic about what their kids are looking at on their phones. Parents are not being realistic about the things that kids talk about. Because when I was 11, no, we weren't talking about porn, and we didn't know the names of porn stars, and we didn't have access to the internet to look at the videos. If your parents had porn in the house, it was because somebody was subscribing to a Playboy or purchasing a Playboy and they paid money for it, or a parent had subscribed and paid for a porn website, but it was a cost. And kids don't have credit cards, and we're not going to steal our parents' credit cards and put that information into a website, and then they get an email or a letter like, oh, thanks for subscribing to big titty Taiwanese girls or whatever. That didn't happen when I was growing up. Now, thanks to Pornhub and RedTube and whoever owned that company and bought up all the paid sites and made them all free and saturated the market, now porn is all over the internet, which isn't a problem because there are more adults in the world, I think, than there are children. So people need to be more responsible about the access. I don't have a problem with porn being on the internet. I have a problem with parents not parenting their kids. I have a problem with parents not watching what their kids are doing or being preemptive. And don't give your kid a smartphone. I'm not anti-phone either. But you know what? There are phones that have no access to the internet. There are phones where you can send you can call. You can text a few numbers, or you disable the internet piece of it. There's ways around it. But here's your brand new iPhone, my 11-year-old son. Go forth into the world and explore it as it is out there. I'm not going to try and filter any of these things for you. Or, here, my 11-year-old son, the world is large. There are people all over the world, and people look at all types of things. I want you to know that not everything on the internet is appropriate for your age. And if one of your friends wants to show you something that you don't look at here at home, that you don't see your dad and I looking at, if one of your friends wants to start exposing you to sex and sexuality, please let me know. Not to get that child in trouble, because that kid doesn't have someone at home protecting them. But I need to protect you from what you see and how you see it. Because the things that kids see in porn skew their perspective on what it is to have sex, what it is to be sexual, what it is to have a relationship. Porn is about instant gratification. Delivery guy shows up. He's really attractive. Lonely housewife whose husband's always on business and he never touches her. She's excited and aroused. They have sex. He leaves. Video over. That's not realistic. It's a fantasy, and kids don't understand that. Porn's a fantasy. For adults, it's created for a certain population, for a certain demographic. And this is why they shouldn't watch it. If they have questions, if they're curious about sex and porn and sexuality, there are safe ways to have those discussions. There are books that were written for children and adolescents, comic books, and there are websites by adults who know how to expose young people to these things in a safe, healthy way to help answer their questions. Or here parents, if your kids ask you a question about sex, just answer it. Don't shush them. Don't shame them. Shame is the common denominator in so much negativity in our society. Don't shame your kids. Don't make them feel bad for being curious about sex. Because guess what? You had to have sex to have that kid. So how old were you the first time you had sex? What was that experience like? Were there questions that you had that nobody answered because you felt shamed and you didn't have access to the internet, books, websites, comic books, bloggers, sex therapists, sex columnists? You didn't have access to all those things to get your questions answered. So a lot of your experience was just trial by fire. Let's have sex for the first time, and it didn't last very long, and I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm going to learn. And then what did you do? If your answer is anything other than, I looked at porn, you're a liar. You looked at some porn. You were probably watching porn before you had sex. Maybe it wasn't until after you had sex. Maybe you watch porn even now as an adult, which is fine, but you didn't know. So you learned some stuff from porn, and it wasn't even accurate or realistic, and that had some impact on your experience as well. Don't make it harder for your kids than it has to be. If they have a question, answer it, please. Or if you don't want to answer it, direct them to me. Send a link, send an inquiry on my website. Send me have a question and answer. Comments on this video. My kid's asking me about this or that. Can you give me some advice on how to broach this conversation? Can you just do a video about this particular topic so that I can show it to my kid and answer their question? I have no problem doing things like that. I love doing things like that. I love giving information. I love making sure that people have access to good, safe, sound, healthy information. So if this is a situation that you're just not comfortable in, that's okay. You don't have to. I don't want to shame you for not feeling comfortable talking about sex. But don't block your kid from the information. If a kid is brave enough to come to you and ask you something about that, be strong enough to guide them. And if you can't give that information out of your own mouth because you're not sure what you want to say or how you want to say it or is it the right thing, send them my way. Because I have talks with kids all the time about sex, condoms, contraceptives, safe sex, consent. Oh God, consent. That is something that I'm just so confused how more people don't talk to their kids about what it means to consent. I I can talk about this till I'm blue in the face, and I love talking about it. So, mini rant before we get into our next crisis evaluation. Internet access. Access to sex. Access to drugs. Access to all of it. I'll get more into the drug access later because I have my own opinions on that. And this is all about my opinions, so if you don't like my opinions, don't watch anymore. There's plenty of videos and people out there who might have perspectives that more align with yours. Or if you just want to hear what other people have to say, thanks. But please don't come here into my domain and then get upset about what I have to say. Because it's all opinion. But it's opinion that's rooted in experience. And it's opinion that's rooted in seeing people do things a certain way and watching it fail. And watching it not work out time and time again. So it's not just me waking up one day and going, I'm going to do a video blog about sex and porn and internet access and teenagers and parenting and all that stuff. No, it's because it's been, how many years? 7 years that I've been doing this. And I keep seeing the same mistakes made year after year, 7 years running. So it's time to put information out there to try and shift that away from the mistake. Stop doing the same things because it's not working. I want to see less women being raped and sexually assaulted and coerced. I want to see less children being sexually abused by adult men who were sexually repressed in their children in that childhood and their adolescence, and that's why they act out in the ways that they do. I want more women to feel comfortable and confident in their own sexuality, whatever that sexuality is, because it's a spectrum, and we'll talk about that too. Sexuality is a spectrum. It's a huge spectrum. Heteronormativity is a delusion. Let it go. At any rate, these are important conversations to have. Again, if you want to talk about this, you have questions for me, your kids have questions and you're not sure how to answer them, you'd like me to do a short video prior to a crisis evaluation, or just do a small blurb, or even just shoot one and I'll post it, but I'll send it right back to you, whatever. Let me know. I am an open book and I welcome inquiries and help and questions and all of that. So that is my pre-crisis evaluation discussion. Parents, stop giving your kids smartphones until they're mature enough to handle the pressure and the responsibility that comes with having a smartphone. If you've already given them the smartphone, don't take it away, but put parental controls on it and restrict their access. Don't shame them if they've already started. If you know that they've seen porn, don't shame them. Have a discussion with them. This will never in your life happen to you. What you just saw in this video, this is never going to happen to you in this way. And if it doesn't, don't get angry. Women don't just drop their panties because some good-looking man showed up. There's a lot more that goes into it. Don't get angry if somebody says no. No means no. I hope you're not distributing this to any of your friends because, here's the kicker. 40 states in the United States have statutes on distribution and child pornography, and they're incarcerating children for sharing sexually explicit images, for taking sexually explicit images of themselves and sending them to a peer. Now that kid is the subject of the content and they are the distributor. Now that kid is going to jail. They're incarcerating these kids. And they have to register as sex offenders for the rest of their lives. These statutes are ruining lives. So you need to educate your kids on the felony that is distributing sexually explicit images to other kids their age, to other kids, period. Under the age of 18, if you get a dick pic, find an adult and show that adult, not to get the other kid in trouble, but if that kid gets found out and they go and check the IPs to see who they sent that picture to, every kid who received the picture is now in trouble because they didn't notify an adult. So they are the recipients of child porn, because that's what they're calling it. A 16-year-old boy sends a dick pic to a 15-year-old girl that he likes, and she shows her friends. He distributed child porn to her, even though he was the subject. She showed her friends. Now she is distributing child porn to her friends. They're all sex offenders. They're all on the registry, and they're all ruined. Educate your children on these statutes until we can do something about them to have them rewritten, because they are ruining lives. and they're not educating. They're not changing anything. They're not doing any good. They're punishing kids for going through puberty. And it's awful. To be continued. But as we transition to our crisis discussion of the week, it was another boy. I had for this particular period of time, I had back-to-back boys. This one was 11 years old. He has a twin brother and another single-parent household. He lives at home with his mom and his twin brother. When I get the crisis evaluation, the presenting problem is that this adolescent was at school and he was being reprimanded for something. He's on the autism spectrum, so his social skills are not where you would hope they would be for an 11-year-old. He doesn't pick up on cues. He's very blunt. He doesn't like something, he's going to express it. He's going to say what's on his mind, and there's really no empathy meter. Not being able to read the teacher's face to know that he maybe shouldn't have said that, or maybe he should stop talking. This kid doesn't have that, but he was brilliant, and I enjoyed my conversation with him. But he's at school, he's being reprimanded for something, and he tells the teacher, it really doesn't matter because I'm going to go home and hang myself anyway, so do what you want. That's what he said to her. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to go home today and hang myself, so do what you want. The school notifies his mother, and the school calls an ambulance and has the child transported without mom to the emergency room. Mom eventually arrives to the ER. The nurse calls, this particular hospital has on-staff social workers. So the social worker, not all hospitals have social workers on staff. A lot of them only have the nurses to handle the situation. Some of them have a social worker, but she doesn't work overnight, or he doesn't work overnight. This hospital does have a social worker on staff 24 hours, which is awesome. So social worker calls it in to the CARES line, which is our area's crisis hub, calls it in, and then I get the call. He expresses this to the school calls the ambulance, takes him to the hospital, and protocol, I call mom. So call comes in, I call her first. We typically need some level of consent to have a conversation with the kid because they're children, and I don't like to just step on parents' toes because I know that so many times these kids say and do things and the parents are not informed until the kid is on the way to the ER, and the parents might know what's going on. They have a better handle on what's going on than the school seems to think. So I always call the parents first. This particular parent refuses to speak to me. So I call and it rings once, boom, goes to voicemail. So I try again. You never know. Maybe in a frenzy, it is a crisis. She's might be frazzled. Maybe she went to answer the phone and she hit the wrong button. I've done it myself a dozen times. So I call back, and it rings once and it goes to voicemail. So now I know I'm being trolled. So I call a third time, just for good measure, good faith attempt to get a hold of this mother before I have to go to the ER and have a discussion with her child, with or without her consent. We'll see. Call the third time, and it goes straight to voicemail, no ring. So I leave her a message the third time. Let her know who I am. I'm calling regarding her son, who I know is sitting in the emergency room, and that I'm en route to the ER. Here's my ETA. If you could please give me a call back, give her my phone number, hang up. I call the nurse. I'm sorry, I call the ER, and I get in touch with the social worker. I work with nurses more than I work with other social workers, so it's a habit to just say I called the nurse. Sorry. I call back, get the social worker, and I ask her, hey, is mom even in the emergency room? She said, oh yes, she's here, but she's refusing to speak to anyone. I said, excuse me? Yes, mom's here. She refuses to speak to anyone, and she actually keeps trying to quiet the child so that he won't tell us what's going on. So I had to have her leave the room and have security escort her out so that I could have a conversation with him and him alone, because while she was in the room with him, if I'd ask her a question, he would start talking, she would shush him. No shame. Shushed him. Not a good sign. So I'm like, oh fuck. It's gonna be one of those nights. When you get a parent who's quieting their child and shushing them, it's not a good sign. some veil of secrecy exists. Maybe they're all being abused and the kid is a victim of abuse, and mom is afraid that if somebody finds out, dad will get in trouble or a boyfriend will get in trouble and he will come back and beat the fuck out of all of them. I've seen that happen quite a few times. So I head out. I get to the ER, and mom still has not called me back by the time I arrive, and it's a good 40-minute hike from where I live to this particular hospital. So I get there, and I find the social worker. She's like, yeah, mom is here. She's in the room. He is arguing with her, telling her that she's not listening to him, that he does want to die, and she just needs to let go. Not good. He's 11. Remember that. This kid is 11 years old and is endorsing complete hopelessness. And I know that I need to have a conversation with him without mom, since she wouldn't call me back and she's refusing to talk to anyone. I don't want to get DCFS involved, but that's a route that we sometimes have to take when we are being blocked by the parent, because that is medical neglect. If your child is suicidal and we're trying to get them help and you are interfering, you're interfering with our ability to save this kid's life. That's a medical neglect, and it is a serious offense in DCFS, which is the Department of Children and Family Services. It's different, I think, everywhere. I don't know what it's called in other places. What the fuck was that? He came from behind me and cut in front of me. What an idiot. Ugh. He was, anyway. But if, I'm not sure what what? He expresses this to his mother, so I go into the room and I introduce myself, and she's sitting with her purse on her lap, and she's got one of her hands in her purse, and I'm immediately uneasy. I'm immediately uncomfortable by what I'm seeing, but I keep it cool. Hi, I'm Lauren. Mom, I tried calling you 3 times to let you know that I was en route. I work with the county. I'm a crisis worker. I was told that your son was transported here because he's experiencing suicidal ideation, and I'm here to do the evaluation to see how we can help. She doesn't respond, but he says, and he has Asperger's, and he's very flat. His affect, his tone of voice, it stays at this level. There's no inflection in his tone. So he says, oh, another one comes in to talk. Here we go. I'll tell you what I told her. Yes, I want to kill myself. I want to die. And she was a Lithuanian. She had a very thick accent. So she shushes him. And I said, okay, Mom, I'm going to need you to step out of the room for a few minutes so that I can have a conversation with him about what's going on. But once he's done, I will come back and I will grab you, and hopefully we can all have a discussion together about what's in his best interest. But if you don't mind, could you please step out? And she doesn't move right away. So I go over the door and I open it. And I open it all the way. And I say, okay, go ahead, and you can either sit in the lobby. There's some chairs right around the hall. You can sit over there, but just don't go too far. I'll come find you when we're done. Give me about 25, 30 minutes. She looks at him and she looks at me and she grabs her bag and she darts out of the room. And he says, I'm glad you got her to leave. Thank you for asking her to go. What do you want me to tell you that the other one doesn't already know? So I go into my spiel, and this kid is brilliant. He's articulate. He's so self-aware. He's smart to a fault. I think he's too smart, which is why he's hopeless. He knows too much. He's experienced a lot. And he says that his brother, but we're not supposed to speak of him, so he keeps saying that the other one, the one we don't talk about, don't say his name. He is mean to me. He hits me. He calls me names. He tells me I'm dumb. He tells me I'm worthless and that I shouldn't be here. And he tells me that I'm fat. This kid is 11, but he's about the size of my 6-year-old daughter. He weighs what they say he weighed. He was less than 70 pounds. He was less than 70 pounds and his chest was protruding. I asked him about his diet, and he says he counts every calorie he consumes, and he only consumes about 300 calories a day, all of which typically occur in breakfast and lunch. He doesn't usually eat dinner because he needs to watch his weight. He says he had tried to kill himself in the past, that he was being bullied at school because he was autistic. He was being bullied at school because he was short, he was little, And he was being bullied because he liked science and he liked outer space. He was very good at math. He was sitting there just doing long division of these incredibly large numbers. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. And when I asked him just how serious of a plan he had, he said, well, I have the rope at home. I know where it is. I'm going to use it. And I asked him, well, when? He said, the next time my mom leaves. She works. She has to go to work. She can't stay home with me forever. So once she goes, I'm going to do it. And I got goosebumps. So I said, okay, we talked a little bit more about things he enjoyed, and I tried to not leave the room right after he said something so heavy, but I did get up and go. And I found the social worker. I told Mom she could go back in. I went and found the social worker. And she said, before I even walked up, please don't tell me you're going to let him go home. And I must have had a look on my face when I looked at her, and she said, oh. And I was afraid. And I said, I have never been so sure that someone was going to hurt themselves as I am in this moment. I don't believe for a second that he would be safe going home. She said, I feel the same way. It's scary. I was like, yep, he's gonna go. I'm gonna place him. There's no way that I can send him home, because who's at home? His brother and his mother. His mother's at work. His mother is shushing him, and he's got a brother who he's saying is abusive. How can I send him home? I can't. So I go back to Mom and I let her know, hey, I had a good conversation with your son. You've heard him say several times now that he wants to kill himself. She says he doesn't mean it. Oh, he doesn't mean it. It's just something he says. And he told me he had attempted in the past, and Mom doesn't know that. And I didn't explicitly say to her what he did. But I said to her, he had a plan. He has a plan. He has an active plan. No, he doesn't have a plan. He's just saying that he wants attention. I said, okay, well, what if I told you that this isn't the first time he had considered this? Well, when does he not consider it? He doesn't get what he wants. I said, well, kids who don't get what they want don't actively try and figure out ways to kill themselves, and they don't actively attempt. So attention or not, if he's looking for attention, what does that tell you? He needs attention for some reason, and if he's willing to go to any extent to get it, he needs some support. Well, just let me take him home. I've been telling them the whole time that I was here, I wanted to take him home. I said, I can't let you take him home because he's here in the ER, and I've been called. He has said, not only to me, but the social worker here and the teacher at school, that he wants to kill himself. I have to do what's best for him, and my position here is to keep him safe. So for that reason, I can't let him go home with you tonight. I have to have the hospital transport him to an inpatient facility. I'm not sure which one yet, but I have to call around to see who has a bed. Do you have any questions about that? And she looks at me with this stone cold. She doesn't blink for what feels like an eternity. She looks at me, then she looks at him, and she looks at the door. And I pick up on this, and I said, do you understand why they have the security guard outside of your room? When kids are brought here with suicidal thoughts or gestures or attempts, one of the safety precautions is to post a security guard outside of their room in case they try to hurt themselves while they're in here, or in case they try to flee, or in case the parent tries to take them out of here without approval, without the kid being released into their care. So if you try to leave, that security guard's going to stop you, and the police will get involved, and DCFS will get involved, and this blows up bigger than it has to be. And I don't think you want that for him. I don't think you want him to kill himself. I don't think you want him to try to kill himself with the plan that he currently has, because I know he's already attempted once, and the plan he had before didn't work. But he's revised the plan, and he's told me he's revised it, so it will work this time. And if she would let us help him, let me help her, and let she and I help him, that we can try and get through this so that it won't be an issue and it won't be an ongoing problem anymore. And then she starts to blame the school. I went to them for help. I needed help with him because he was so sad. He was being bullied and nobody was doing anything about it. And I went to them, and he expressed that he didn't want to be alive anymore because of the bullying. And they've heard him say this before, but they also know he's autistic, and they know that he doesn't mean it. And I said, well, we can never know when someone means something or they don't mean it. They don't know he doesn't mean it. They know that he is autistic, yes, but that doesn't mean that autistic people don't take their own lives. So that's not a fair assessment, a fair judgment for you to place on the school. It doesn't matter. We went to them for help and they didn't help us. But if you need to put him in the hospital, then I guess do what you have to do. I said, okay, I'm gonna go make some phone calls and I'll be back. So I did eventually find a placement for this kid. He said he was glad he was going because he knew that if he didn't go, he was gonna hurt himself, and that maybe somebody could help him not want to hurt himself anymore. He goes in, and I'm sure he has had his follow-up. I explained to them the standard 90 days at home or at school. She says they already have counseling in order. I said, okay, well, if that's the case, then you don't have to work with us too. But if you don't have counseling, then we're available. It's to be determined. She doesn't have to follow up. We will, our position is to try. But I had her sign a release so that we could go into the school so he could be seen there. So even if she doesn't bring him in the office, we can still go see him at school and at least try and give him some tools and coping skills. I think one of the first things we would work on is his, so if I was the one who was going to be doing counseling with him, really get to the bottom of what's going on with him and his brother. Because his home life is chaotic and it's spilling over into his school life. And I found out that his brother is a part of the group that's bullying him, because remember, they're twins and they're in the same class. So he's being bullied at home by his brother, and then he's being bullied at school by his brother and his brother's friends. So we get to the bottom of that. I would get the school involved, and there's more than one 5th grade class. This kid's going to need to get placed into a different class, whether it's him or his brother, but they need to separate them. There needs to be some separation here because it's consistent. His brother's always around. So I'd work with mom, we work with the school on trying to put him in another 5th grade class. Understanding what's going on with the brother, and then really understanding where his sense of self comes from, how and why he looks so low on himself, why he doesn't feel worthy of living. We discussed that. We would talk about thought distortions, and I would teach him how to, is there a lot of truth to that thought? So nobody loves me. What do you mean nobody loves you? Why do you say that? And let him answer and go from there. Like, does nobody love you, or do you think that this person and this person don't love you? Well, those people. And what is it about those people where you feel like they don't love you? And let him answer, and just give this kid a platform to talk, to vent, to get it out, and just hear him, to validate what he says and try and change his perspective. It would take time, but we would work on it. That would be my that would be my focus. Oh, I'm going in there. But yeah, work on challenging the negative thought. Work on trying to get him to see his value. Maybe even working with some family counseling, him and his mom, trying to get to get an understanding of why she was so eager to shush him. That's important. Whatever information he could give on that, just really giving this kid a healthy ear. Sometimes that's all a person needs, is somebody to listen non-judgmentally. Yeah, that one sticks with me because he was so adamant. I had never met an 11-year-old who was so dead set on dying. He wasn't self-harming or anything like that. He denied a history of sexual abuse. He said his brother was bullying him and being mean to him, so he did say he was being verbally abused and emotionally abused. Didn't have anything to say about dad, didn't know his father, said he didn't know anything about him. But if this is something that you are dealing with, if you're being bullied, if you're being picked on by a sibling and it's excessive, and you're, just like the kid from last week whose brother was telling him to kill himself, You know, this kid, his brother didn't tell him to kill himself, but, you know, he was contributing to the negative self-worth. You know, he was contributing really, really strongly to this kid's inability to see beyond what was happening and see any good in life. If this is something that you're dealing with, you know, please don't feel shamed. If somebody's picking on you, let somebody know. If somebody is telling you to kill yourself, let somebody know. If you're experiencing any type of eating disorder, you know, if you're restricting, if you're starving yourself, if you're limiting your calories, there's a reason why we have nutritional guidelines. And if you're not eating and you're not nourishing your body, then your mental health is going to suffer because your brain's not getting the fuel it needs to keep levels where they need to be. So your serotonin levels, your dopamine levels, you know, you're not able to regulate these emotions because the fuel in your brain you need to regulate those emotions is non-existent. I'm so sorry. Like I said last week, I'm still trying to get over this cold. For you, it's a week. I filmed that other video yesterday. So I'm putting them out a week, you know, apart, but this is the same, you know, I just filmed that. I filmed last week's video yesterday, so yesterday for me, a week and a day for you at this point. But don't be ashamed. You know, there are lots of counselors out there who work with children, who work with adolescents, who can teach you how to get through this stuff, who can give you the skills and the tools that you need to have the life that you deserve. This kid was hospitalized for a week, and he eventually went home, and, you know, like I said, outpatient stuff will follow, hopefully. But that's our installment for the week. If you have any questions or comments on this video, please let me know. You can go to my website, EWA, Illinois, ILLINOIS.org. I have a tab on my homepage, The Traveling Therapist. You can go there and submit your questions, your inquiries, your, you know, what have you. Comment on the video here. Leave comments and I'll respond to them. I respond to all my questions and comments. And so, you know, because I'm sure that there are questions and comments from the video last week, I haven't uploaded these yet. Eventually I'll catch up to where they're more consistent. But if you leave a comment, it will be acknowledged, whether I acknowledge it on my website. Sometimes I do write blogs as well, so sometimes I'll get questions and comments and I'll just kind of do a quick blurb on my website too. If it's something that I can fill a video blog with, then I'll do it on the video blog. And maybe the longer I do this, then I'll dig back in, and at the end, you know, here's 5 questions or 5 comments, just to really get my listeners active in this process. My watchers, not my listeners. But we'll get there. So please comment, leave questions, comments. Go to my website. If you're in the state of Illinois and you want to do FaceTime, counseling via FaceTime, I don't do insurance with that, but I do have a sliding scale and the rate is very reasonable. I do not charge the full amount for counseling services when we do counseling over FaceTime. The sessions are 40 minutes and the cost is very, very, very appropriate. The purpose is not to make anybody broke to get the mental health services. Again, access is an issue. Access to mental health care is an issue in our society right now. So if you're in the state of Illinois and you're interested in counseling, go to my website, the appointments tab or the new clients tab. You can submit an inquiry. You can select FaceTime, put all your information in, and your inquiry will come to me, and I'll contact you to do our initial little quick consultation to see what your needs are and if I can actually be an appropriate service for you. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video today and listen to what I had to say. I hope it was useful for those of you out there struggling in these areas to kind of get some insight and to know again that you're not the only one dealing with these problems, that it's so common. You're not alone. So take care. I'll see you guys next week. Be well.